Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator DeMint, for being here. I've known you for a long time and admired you from afar, long before I came to know you as a friend and colleague. And I especially appreciate your message today. It reminds me a little bit of a statement that was attributed to St. Augustine during his conversion to Christianity, when he said something to the effect of, Lord, grant me chastity and virtue, but not yet. He wanted to wait. It's always easier to wait to do the right thing. It's especially true in Washington. You mentioned a minute ago some of the arguments that are frequently raised in response to the argument for term limits. One of them is that it's not a panacea. It won't solve every problem, as if to suggest that if we can't solve every problem with term limits, we shouldn't try to solve this one. What can you tell us, based on your experience, about how individual members might behave differently if term limits were on the books and they were imposed by the constitutional amendment?
Well, we've talked a lot about it, but if, again, the freedom that comes from being able to act for your constituents and not to act towards getting a future position on a committee or a chairmanship, and most of you know, sitting up there, you rocked the boat your first year up here, which you did. The chances of you going into elected leadership in the conference go down dramatically. It would surprise me. And so, again, if you come up and you want to get to be the prize when I got here was to be a senior member of appropriations. Once the earmarks went away, it was not nearly as desirable of a committee to be on. But to have the seniority means you raise more money. All the lobbyists come to your fundraisers. That creates a ability of you to endear yourself to other members by raising money in your PAC. All of this just creates, again, a nexus of power that goes with seniority and that we see with corruption. And if I could just interject, one of my colleagues here just handed me a list of 13 former senior members who have been sent to jail because of bribery or corruption here. This is the American government. This is 13 here. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit these names for the record if I could.
Without objection.
But the evidence is everywhere that seniority, again, protects the status quo. It stops us from solving the huge problems. And then it's the seniority system that allows people to come in and create this new program, because the only bipartisan consensus now in Congress is when you create something new and spend more money. There is never any other bipartisan agreement.
That's well said. I appreciate your insight on that. I also especially appreciated the distinction you drew during your opening testimony between the philosophical arguments for term limits and the practical arguments. It's just interesting to think about the fact that this 230-year-old document is one that has functioned well. It's fostered the development of the greatest civilization the world has ever known, and it has done so in part because of the fact that it adequately harnessed human nature. It took into account certain aspects of human nature and pitted one faction against another, one branch of government against another, so that no one person or group of people could get too much power. I think they probably did, as you were alluding to earlier, make the right decision when they had decided initially not to put term limits into the original Constitution. There are some things that have changed since then, or that the Founding Fathers didn't adequately take into account. I suspect that one of them might have been the rise of the dominant two-party system. Another might have been the excessive accumulation of power within Washington, the transfer of as much power from the states to Washington as has happened. And then with that transfer of power, the drive to delegate out the lawmaking power to someone else. Can you speak to that and what the Founding Fathers might have missed?
A lot has changed. I think if we really knew the conditions of those serving in the early Congresses, it would not be necessary to limit terms, in the sense of it was not full-time, there was very little pay, there were no retirement programs or thrift savings programs, limited staff, long travel to get here. It was certainly a sacrifice. So folks needed to have other jobs back home, farms or whatever, to make things work. There wasn't quite the danger. But now the allure here in Washington is quite different, that you can make it a full-time career with decent retirement and a post-congressional career that can be very lucrative. Lots of staff. Again, it's a very different situation. And the money in politics, and I think as you alluded to, Senator Lee, is the power that has convened here in Washington, D.C. from all over the world. It's here because of the concentration of political power. Now we have the concentration of economic power, concentration of media power, and all of that really comes back to the real powers and the seniority within these walls. And we can't fix it with one fell swoop, but we can sure break up a lot of it and change the incentives in a hurry.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator DeMint.